Hello, this is the Python coding session as a part of the Triumphs and Trials workshop at the GenOne conference. We didn't have time at the end to run this session, so this is a pre-recorded version that you can watch at your own time. We are going to be talking about the Python language, which is really popular these days. Here are 12 lines of code written in Python that would hopefully get you started with thinking about programming and learning about the logic behind codes. We are using this online programming compiler, which is not the best one out there, but it's easy to access, and even on your phone you can access it. I also don't endorse using this platform to learn how to use Python, but again, there are better ones out there, but this is the one that we're going to be using today, which is easy to use. So let's get started. As you can see, I have these codes here. For the most part, codes will run sequentially, so like from the top to the bottom. So, and if a certain line of code is faulty, then the program would just basically stop there and doesn't continue. So let's say I click run, and what this makes me do is it makes me guess a random number between 1 and 100. So you can make your guess, say 50, and then it's too high, so you have to adjust your guess based on the output. So I have to go a bit higher, a little bit higher. So it took me 4 guesses to guess the number 45, which is pretty good. So how does this code work? So let's start with, so let's open new tab, and we can clear out all these codes. We don't need them. And let's start with the coding part. So I'm going to have you type import random. So import means to bring in certain packages. In this case, the package is called random. And within this random package, it contains certain instructions to tell the program how to generate a random number. So let's generate a random number. So I'm going to have you type num equals random dot randrang bracket 1 comma 100 comma 1. So what are we doing here? Num is just like a variable, like X, Y, and Z that you learned in math class, except we can name them, give them different names. In this case, we're calling it num. And here we are actually storing numbers in these variables, but in reality, you can store anything in these variables, like words or like other things. So in this case, what are we storing in num? We're storing this random number. So within the random package, we have this instruction, and this would generate a random number between 1 and 100 with increments of 1. So going from 1 and add 1 each time until you reach 100. So once that number is generated, it gets stored in a num variable. So next line, I'm going to have you type get equals int, bracket. Within the bracket, you have to type input, another bracket, and then within this bracket, you have to add quotes, and then type get, colon. So what this does is you're creating another variable called get. And what are you storing in this variable called get? You're storing an integer, which is just numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then what are we turning into integers, which is the input that users would have to type in on their computer. So in this case, the user would input a number, and once that number is turned into integer, it would be stored in guess. So if we just click run now, it will make you guess a number. And if we type 50, the number will be stored in the guess variable. And okay, next up, I'm going to have you type step equals 1. So step is another variable, and in this case, I'm doing a count of how many steps you've taken to reach the number. So in this case, because you've just guessed once, so like you've taken one step to get to the random number. So the next few lines of code, I would like you to type it all out before I explain them. So there are a couple lines of code. I'm going to have you type while, guess, exclamation mark, equals, num, colon. And start a new line. Type if, guess, smaller than, which is the left arrow, num, colon. Notice that the if is indented under while, which is actually normal, and this indentation is actually required for the program to do its thing. So again, type in start a new line, type in print, quotes, too low. So print is also indented under if, which is again normal, and it is required for for a program to function properly. And then I'm going to have to start a new line. And this time I'm going to have you click backspace once, and your cursor should now be under if. So I'm going to have you type another statement called if, guess, bigger than, num, colon, enter, print, too high. So as you can see that these two ifs are indented under while, and there are two print sentences under the ifs. So hopefully by now you have typed in all these codes. So I'll explain it. While is sort of a loop, and everything that's indented under while will be looped. And when do we decide that this loop function is going to be carried out? Is when guess does not equal to num. So exclamation mark and an equal sign simply means does not equal to. So when your guess does not equal to the random number that you generated, then it will enter this while loop. So under this while loop, we have these statements called if. So what this does is, if your guess does not match your number, it will sort of check if your guess is smaller than your number, or if your guess is bigger than your number. If it's smaller than your generated number, it will print too low. If your guess is bigger than the number generated, it's going to print too high. So let's say if we run this code now, and let's say if we type 50, and then it will generate too low. And the reason why there's so many too lows and it just keeps going is because the while loop is exercising, and it just keeps looping because guess does not equal num. So it'll just keep looping and looping. So we need a way to stop this from happening, because once you make this guess and you then hit the number, you want to make a new one. So I'm going to have you type start new line, bring the indentation back under if, and I'm going to have you type guess. This is the same line as you see in line 3. We're just going to repeat that here, or you can copy and paste that. So we are going to make the user make a new guess. And that is under the while loop, because if your guess does not equal your number, the generated random number, you have to make a new guess. And once you make that guess, you have to update the step count because you've made a new guess and you've taken one more step to reach the random number. So I'm going to have to type step equals step plus 1. So this might not make a lot of sense to you because why would step equal step plus 1? But in Python, this equal sign really just means assign. So you're assigning something to a variable. So in this case, we're actually assigning step plus 1. So the current step count, add 1 to that, and assign this new number to step. So we're updating the step variable. And this is really some kind of iteration that we can do with programming that is sometimes helpful. And make sure to include guess and step under if. So the indentation should be under if, because you would do this regardless of whether your guess is smaller than your num or if your guess is greater than your num, because you have to make a new guess either way. And that's why you have to indent it under while, but not indent it under any of these if statements. The next line of code that I'm going to have you type is start a new line, bring your cursor all the way back to the edge, and type print, step, comma, quotes, guesses. So what this does is, you have to repeat this while loop, many times, because every time you make a new guess, and when your step count is updated, it actually checks for your guess again, because while loop goes like from the top to the bottom, and then it would start back again on top. So now it would again check if your guess now equals your number. So if your guess still doesn't match the number, it will keep running this while loop. So let's say that your guess finally matches your number. And in that case, the while loop will end, and anything outside the while loop will be run. So this line of code that we just typed here is outside the while loop. And this line will not run unless we've exited the while loop. And when do we exit the while loop? Is when guess equals number. So when you finally reach the number, the computer program will print step. Step is the variable that you created, and it has a number stored in it. So when you say print step, it's not going to print the word step because, as you can see, step is not in quotation marks. It will actually print the value associated with step, which in this case is how many steps you've taken to reach the random number. And after step, followed by the word guesses, that is just a word that we attach to the step count. So it shows you how many steps you've taken. So let's run this program. So if we click run, it will ask you for an input. So let's set 50. It's too high, so we have to go lower. Still too high, so I have to go. Now it's too low, so I have to go back with higher. Too high, so I'm going to have to do lower. Too low, so now it's pretty obvious that the answer is 34. And here it's printing out the number of steps you've taken and the word guesses, which is this step here. So hopefully this coding session helps you understand, the very basics of coding. So that includes variables, creating variables, assigning values to variables, how to get input from the user, and how the while loop works and how if statements work. So, and the idea of iterations. So the fact that when you're repeating certain sets of codes with the while loop, you're making iterations, you're updating the value of a certain variable as you go. So hopefully this is a reminder that, STEM can still be really fun and engaging. So hopefully you've learned something from this coding session that I did. And I hope that you've enjoyed the GenOne conference. And I wish you all best of luck. And yeah, thank you so much.